Hello Internet, it's Andrew Michael, and welcome to episode 7 of the Andrew Michael Podcast. The podcast where we talk about Power Rangers, Super Sentai, and more. If you want to check out more of these episodes, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. This week, we got a request from one of my longtime supporters, Sarkis, who asked me on a stream when I was at the time of recording. This was Sunday when he asked, should Hasbro adapt Uchu Sentai Kyuranger from 2017? And we are going to ask, and I will give you my opinions on whether they should adapt this, whether Hasbro should adapt this as the 30th season, if they were still going to be under contract with Toei. So, with that being said, let's get into this week's podcast. So, Uchu Sentai Kyuranger. It aired from 2017 to 2018. It was the season after Zyuohger, which is another season that if Hasbro was going to keep the contract with Toei, that I think they should probably go with. But with Kyuranger presents a unique problem. So, with that being said, let's get into why I think they should, and then I will get into why they probably won't do it. But I would like to sit here and speculate the pros and cons on if they should or if they won't, and obviously why they won't, and why I think that maybe they may not go with it. So with that being said, let's get into the pros. So obviously, the pros of adapting Kyuranger is the amount of Power Rangers. Now obviously, as a kid when you're watching Power Rangers, if it's a 3 or 5 person team, you're like, okay, that's cool, but when are we going to get, a new Power Ranger? When are we going to get, a new Zord? When are we going to get, a new team up? When are we going to get this? When are we going to get that? And it was always one of those things that was, it would keep you watching to see if it would just be, a storyline progression, or if it would be, a couple episodes in, boom, another Zord. A couple episodes in, boom, a new Ranger, right? This season with Kyuranger had a ton of Rangers. I think at the end, I believe they wound up with 12 Rangers. It might have been more, but I think it was 12. And I believe Hasbro was asked why didn't they adapt Kyuranger over now that we know it as Dino Fury. Hasbro was like, well, it's 12 Rangers. That's a lot of Rangers. And, with it being Hasbro, this was coming after Beast Morphers. And Beast Morphers, I thought, did okay. I thought it could have done better. And with the return of with the debut of Dino Fury being on Netflix, it will show what Hasbro is going to do with Power Rangers. But I think with Kyuranger, with it having, 12 Rangers, that's a lot of Rangers, but nonetheless, you can have a different Ranger show up every couple of episodes, and then with the Zords, that is a lot of Zords, which brings us to another point, the amount of Zords and the amount of merchandise they could do with Kyuranger. Now, if it were me, obviously, if you're doing Kyuranger with Power Rangers, that is a lot of merchandise, aka there's a lot more variety to go around. And with the Morpher, being all cool and whatnot, because it is very unique, I do think that, with the toy sales, it would sell very well. Now, granted, if this were Bandai America, I wouldn't have much faith in that because, Bandai America has been hit or miss. But with Hasbro, they've been doing pretty decent. And honestly, if they did Kyuranger adaptation in America, I would still have faith in Hasbro to do a decent job, at least with, Kyuranger and with the little globe thingies that they had, the little orbs, if you will. I do think nonetheless that the quality of toys would be good, and with the diverse and the overall, spread outness or broadness, if you will, of the Zords, I do think it would allow people to get a ton of merchandise, and with that, Hasbro would be breaking in the dough with that because of the amount of Zords and the amount of Power Rangers that they have and the amount of orbs that they could use for the Morpher, which is obviously one of the things they like doing. When we saw it with Super Mega Force, when we saw it with Ninja Storm, sometimes they would have throwback stars or throwback little keys you can use for your Morpher to get retro sounds. Toy companies, Bandai America has loved doing that, and I could absolutely see them doing something with Kyuranger. But the thing is, with it being the 30th anniversary, I'm not sure if that would necessarily fit, because it isn't like a whole season dedicated to callbacks, but again, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be like they could have their own content and they could bring in past Rangers and they could do that, and that would be pretty interesting nonetheless. The third option is, the overall theme is about constellations, right? And it's one of the few seasons where it talks about space as the general idea of it. Now, obviously, this is about constellations, and that, with kids these days, obviously, the big thing is dinosaurs, hence why I believe it was smart for Hasbro to go with Ryusoulger as the 28th and 29th season of Power Rangers. Because with kids, you show them a dinosaur and kids are going to be, oh yeah, dinosaurs. But when you show them stuff about space and constellation, they're like, oh wow, that's actually really cool. Hence why I'm really doubtful that, Tokuger. I don't know why I just blanked out on that. But that's why I'm doubtful, very doubtful on Tokuger, because in America, kids really aren't super interested in trains like they once used to be. But when you show them stuff about dinosaurs and space and stars, kids are really interested with that. And because of that, I do think that Hasbro would have a decent chance of getting new audience members, because it's talking about space. It's talking about all this. And with it being space, you could bring in some, the big guys, the celebrities that talk about space and whatnot, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and all these people that talk about space and whatnot. You bring them in for cameos, people know who they are, and it will get people talking about Power Rangers. And with that, you can have people invested in Power Rangers once again. Now, I want to get into some cons as to why I don't necessarily think that Hasbro would go with Kyuranger for the 30th anniversary, or if they would adapt it. The big thing, obviously, it's a ton of Rangers, right? When they were talking about why they may not adapt it, 12 Rangers, when you think about it, is a lot of Rangers, Normally, your usual Power Ranger team will probably wind up at the end being 7, maybe 8 Rangers if they're lucky, but most of the time it winds up only being like 6, maybe 7 Rangers, depending on what season it is. And with that, you start to think of, oh man, 12 Rangers, that's a lot, because when you're trying to use footage and all of that, that is a lot of Rangers to cast, and a lot of, money going towards, getting all 12 members in and doing all of that. But the good thing about that is, again, it creates a lot of diversity and a lot of, okay, we're getting this Ranger, we're getting this Ranger, and it builds upon each new character. And so with that, I think that's more of a, not less a con, but more like a interesting problem in itself. And then another thing that Hasbro talked about was the Yellow Ranger's helmet. If you don't remember, I think Hasbro also was asked, why they wouldn't adapt it. And one of them was the Yellow Ranger's helmet is too pointy, and they don't want kids to be hurt when they're, if they ever make a Yellow Ranger figure, they don't want kids to get spiked with that little thing. And I'm like, but couldn't y'all just like sand the corners down a little bit, And it's like, it doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 comparison, but like, you could just like cut off and square off the edges of Yellow Ranger's helmet, and boom, you got your problem solved. And then kids won't be dangerously poking each other with it and causing mad accidents. And, well, that would be causing a bunch of problems if they love them pointing like that, which is why when it comes to kids, you gotta really be careful now, because if they're not, they would cause a lawsuit. But again, it's one of those, it's a problem, but yet there are plenty of simple solutions, that would be able to solve that problem. And it's like, it's one of those that's like, there's problems with Kyuranger, and why the amount of Rangers and the amount of, the amount of costumes they'd have to use, and the amount of people they'd have to do, and the amount of people they'd have to cast. And it's like, but there's so many simple solutions to it. And it's like, it's one of those seasons where I think everyone would love to see Kyuranger be adapted. And I am on board with that, because it by far was one of the best seasons of Sentai to date, because of how memorable it was. Every season was like, so lucky, and the characters were awesome. The villains were cool. Every person, every single Sentai member had a character they developed. And even at the end, when everyone came together, I get it, it's a lot of bodies, but still, it still presented one of the best Sentais that's been in years, and I stand by that. And I know Ryu Soldier is a safe bet, it's with dinosaurs, and we know how many kids are into dinosaurs, and we know that everyone's talking about Dino Fury and all that, but I think if they went with Kyuranger for the 30th season, I wouldn't be totally opposed to that, and I do think that they would do pretty well with it, because again, it's about constellations, it's about space. We haven't had too many space seasons. We've had a good bit of dinosaur seasons, and you can only do dinosaur seasons for so long until it becomes really repetitive, and kids these days will then become like, oh, well, it's just another dinosaur season. Like, what is there to do next, And I think with it being about constellations and the kids being able to learn about different constellations and being able to see different color uniforms, that's also why I think Dino Charge and why I think Kyuranger also did pretty well, because it was a ton of Rangers. They had 10 Rangers near the end with Dino Charge, and they didn't really cause a problem with that. They had a ton of Dino Chargers. They had a ton of Rangers to work with, and that was one of the things with Dino Charge. Like, when we thought about Saban, it was like they didn't have a problem adapting Dino Charge. But again, the thing that helped Dino Charge was because it was a dinosaur season. And if it wasn't about dinosaurs, I'm pretty sure Saban wouldn't have done it. But regardless of that, it's just like, when you have diversity and you have a variety of choice to go with, then a lot of people are like, let's go with Kyuranger, right? And I think a lot of people were disappointed when Kyuranger wasn't selected, because everyone knows what Kyuranger is. Everyone that has seen Kyuranger honestly wants it because of how memorable and how awesome that season was. But again, you understand why they went with Dino Fury, right? And so going back to Kyuranger and with the actors and whatnot, and with the amount of Rangers, it goes back to, like, why shouldn't they, And I'm like, but again, I can see why Hasbro would be hesitant, because of course they got to see, what would happen in 2023. Now, obviously, if Hasbro and Toei are splitting up, obviously they can't do it, because if they did it, then Toei would be like, you split up with us, therefore you can't use Kyuranger, right? And so, because of that, obviously it shuts down the door of them being able to do Kyuranger. And if Hasbro's not able to adapt any more Sentai seasons, then I think it would present Hasbro with the problem of, okay, what can we do that really hasn't been done too much? And I still think that they would go with a space season eventually down the road. But again, in 2023, everything is up in the air right now, because we really don't have any idea what necessarily is going to be the direction for Power Rangers in 2023. We obviously know in 2022 that they're going to be putting, Dino Fury Season 2 on Netflix. And with the success or lack of, depending on how things do, I do think it will present Hasbro with the situation of, okay, maybe we shouldn't have broke off with Toei, maybe we shouldn't try this. But again, it goes back to the old saying, you never really know what can happen until you try it. Same thing with experimenting, If you do an experiment and it fails miserably, then you know not to do it again, right? But again, I would just like to have seen it if they went with Kyuranger, because one, it's a big season, and two, it's a ton of Rangers, and there's so much merchandise they could do. Like, if you go to the store and you see a ton of selection and a ton of variety with Power Rangers, then kids are going to be like, oh, I don't have that one. Oh, they just came out with a new Ranger. I want that one, right? The thing with Dino Fury that I think is interesting is the amount of Zords they have. Like, when Dino Fury starts releasing more toys and they start releasing more Zords, that's the one thing that will keep Dino Fury going, is they can space out when each Zord comes out. And so because of the amount of Zords that Dino Fury has, that's the one thing that I do think will keep it together. And if you look at an old season like Sun Vulcan, there was only 3 Sentai members there. But again, that was a different time. But if there was a season of Power Rangers that only had 3 Rangers, then things might get stagnated if you were only there to see the variety of Rangers and the variety of Zords, because eventually things would become stale and people wouldn't care too much about what's going on. Because in today's age, while consistency is good, it is good to also bring in a different bit of variety, because when you introduce variety into something, then people can see that there's more of a broader selection. And because of that, it will keep people's interest in why they should keep watching Power Rangers. Why should they watch this season? Oh, they can watch this season. And it's a good thing that, it was a good thing that Toei didn't just do the same exact thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. Because let's say if they did Go Ranger the whole entire time, then it would be kind of stagnated, because it'd be like, okay, it's the same Rangers, same concept, nothing different about it. But because Toei and Sentai did a different theme almost every different year, then it was like, okay, well, there's a different theme going on this year. And so with that, I think because of the amount of variety, that's why people are really interested in Kyuranger, because of the amount of variety that they can go with and the ability to space out the new Rangers coming in and the new powers coming in and the new morphers and the new orbs and whatnot. And I think overall, if we're talking in a business standpoint, Kyuranger really presents itself in a good spot. And if Hasbro were to keep on their thing with Toei, I do think it would be a good idea to adapt Kyuranger down the line, even though it's probably not going to happen with it being Hasbro and them being like almost the new parents of Power Rangers. But nonetheless, I do think they should adapt it. I want to know down in the comments below, what do you think? Do you think Hasbro should adapt Kyuranger? Or let's say if Hasbro was not going to break up with Toei, do you think they would adapt Kyuranger? Let me know down in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching this week's podcast. If you enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Agent Michael, and I will see you in the next one. Go, Power Rangers!